Hello, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are on this beautiful planet of ours. Welcome to Sustainability in Your Ear. This is the podcast conversation about accelerating the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society, and I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. Thanks for joining the conversation today. Growing, packaging, transporting, and distributing food is a major source of society's emissions, accounting for approximately 26% of annual carbon dioxide output. Reducing the impact of food production is critical to bringing society back within planetary boundaries. And our guest today wants to, quote, decarbonize and hyper-localize food and beverage manufacturing, unquote. Wayne McIntyre is co-founder and CEO of Montreal-based Relocalize. The company is developing technology and a business strategy for decentralized food production using automated microfactories that are placed close to major consumer markets, and sometimes even within retail outlets. Relocalize raised its first funding late last year and closed an extension of that round in May, collecting a total of $5.8 million to accelerate its growth. It promises retailers full control over their supply chain in exchange for providing just 1,200 square feet of space for Relocalize's operations in its facilities. The result, Relocalize claims, will be up to a 30% savings on products, 90% less CO2 emissions, and other operational savings because the food does not need to be transported long distances. It's an intriguing vision, and you can learn more about Relocalize at relocalize.com. We'll speak with Wayne McIntyre right after this commercial break. Welcome to the show, Wayne. How you doing today?
Doing great, Mitch. Thank you for the invitation to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us. Now, we're speaking to you from Montreal. That's where Relocalize is headquartered. How are things in Montreal? How's the weather this summer?
Well, it's good ice weather today. Bright, sunny, about 85 degrees. So couldn't ask for better.
Relocalize, really interesting model of deploying microfactories, robotic microfactories at grocery distribution centers. How does that work to reduce the overall impact of the food system and eliminate that middle mile transportation impact?
If you think about how manufactured foods are typically made, you've got large centralized factories. So if we think about, say, a bottling plant for, say, a Coca-Cola or a Pepsi, in Canada, for example, they only have 4 bottling plants for Coca-Cola. So what happens is the product is made there, it's then put on a truck and it's driven to a distribution center. And that's the middle mile, that journey from the centralized or regional production hub to a DC. And not surprisingly, there's a heck of a lot of carbon, food miles, and cost associated with that journey. So what Relocalize is all about is about building autonomous factories that you can put at the distribution center. Mm-hmm. It's about 5% of the scale of a full-scale plant. And by putting them right at that DC, you can actually get rid of the truck completely. So if you think about the value chain or for manufactured foods, everything upstream of the retailer, when we're talking about a grocer who controls their own DC, is collapsed, put right there at the DC. And that means you can completely remove that middle mile link.
Well, nevertheless, stuff still needs to be brought there. And I can see how the redistribution step takes out an immense amount of mileage. Mm-hmm. When you talk about reducing the overall impact of the carbon emissions, are you factoring in the delivery of all those materials, those raw materials that are going to be processed?
Absolutely. It's very good question, Mitch. This works really well for products where you have a simple input supply chain.
Okay.
Right? So you make your, if there's packaging, it's made on site, right? Mm-hmm. If it's a product like water, so we focus primarily on products made of water. That's our focus for a few good reasons. One, it comes out of every tap in every building in North America, so it's readily available. And when you talk about products made of water, ice very simply is water. So it's water, energy plus packaging. Right? So that's a very simple input supply chain. When you talk about a beverage, it's concentrate or powder plus water plus packaging. And I think for products such as that, the simple input supply chain means you're really eliminating the vast majority of all logistics required, because that input supply chain is so simple. When you have a product that is complicated, what will happen is, unfortunately, you may solve a distribution supply chain problem and create an input supply chain problem. So this is definitely not something that would work for everything.
Okay, so that was one of my questions is we think about a 1,200 square foot facility, and essentially it's a container with robots inside.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to imagine how you could do a full range of foods, but I can see where if you focus on these particular categories, that makes a lot of sense. Now, your current project is ice, which
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. It's also the foundation for a cold chain. What are your plans to expand into other forms of food or beverages in particular, as you mentioned?
We see an opportunity for anything made of water, really. And so, ice is one, beverage is another. A tomato is also mostly water. It's energy,
Hmm.
right? It's nutrients and it's water and seeds. So these are all very simple input supply chain products made of water. The challenge with the vertical farming end of the spectrum is, can you put enough throughput
Yeah.
through a microfactory or production facility to justify the investment in robotics and automation? And unfortunately, today, where we're not internalizing externalities,
Yeah.
it's very difficult to make an economic case for that. I do believe and hope that that will change over time. So it could work all the way to the vertical farming end of the spectrum, hyper-localize and production like that at DCs. But for now, where it really works, where the economics work today, are packaged ice and beverage. So we're laser focused on packaged ice. This, believe it or not, is a multi-billion-dollar market just in North America. It's a huge opportunity for us in the hundreds of millions, if not billions, of revenue just on packaged ice. So we'll stay focused there for the primary reason that we want to prove the model. We want to get retailers to buy in. We want to get customers to buy in. We want to prove, hey, it is possible to be better, greener, and cheaper, and then build on that foundation of business model strength to move into other categories, such as beverage, which is a multi-trillion-dollar market when you look at it globally.
Now, as you say, starting green and improving the green model is critical. How are you setting up to measure the efficiencies you're creating, and particularly reductions in environmental impact?
Right now, most of our modeling is internal. So we've done pretty much we focus, of course, on transportation carbon footprint. And that's an important source of additionality. And there's a huge opportunity there. It's very easy to measure, right? We understand the energy consumed by cold chain. We understand the energy consumed by trucks. That's an easy place to start. But right now, internally, we're expanding beyond that to the other aspects of cold chain. So if you think about it, for example, because we produce on demand on site, you don't need a cold storage warehouse. Now there's an energy and carbon reduction there. But what many people don't realize is when you're talking about cold chain, a lot of the greenhouse gas impact is actually leaks of refrigerant.
Yeah.
So when you're getting rid of the trucks, it's one thing to calculate, the regular consumption of energy from fossil fuels and from the refrigeration process, but just the benefit of eliminating each of those elements in the chain, from cold storage warehouse to the individual trucks or the reefers where you have the refrigeration units on them. There's a huge benefit even just from eliminating refrigerant leaks. So this is where this is the expanded modeling. It's more complicated. Right now we do it internally. However, we will be working, we haven't announced it yet, but a large management consultancy is actually supporting us with a pro bono project where they will be doing some advanced modeling for us. We'll be benefiting for some real, globally well-known and experts in the field of transportation logistics. As well, we'll be working with other consultants who really specialize in this field, because it's critically important to us as a purpose-driven company that we don't just do our own numbers, that we have external third-party validation, because at the end of the day, we want other people to learn from what we're doing. We want retailers to celebrate their successes and then want to invest more in hyper-local solutions in the future, because they've got strong data backing.
Those grocery companies, the big food companies, obviously have very pressing needs to reduce their impact. How are you taking the story to them and sharing what the accomplishments that they could reach and explaining how you plug into their supply chain? That must be a complex conversation.
It is. And it's an important conversation for them as well, because they feel the pressure for consumers, right,
Mhm.
for more sustainable solutions. At the same time, the message they're getting from the market today is we don't want to pay more for it. And that's something that we're going to have to solve as a society, internalizing externalities or just getting comfortable with I think paying for sustainability. But right now, it's I think the discussion goes very well because ultimately much of the power to affect change there is not in the hands of the retailers. Most of it comes from their supply chain,
Yeah.
right? So they can make their refrigeration more efficient. They can put in LED light bulbs. They can use, maybe for home delivery, electrified vehicles. But really, much of the footprint in our food system is controlled by the supply chain, the suppliers, people like us, right? I think what really gets them excited is we're giving them an opportunity by taking that value chain, collapsing it, and bringing it to their distribution center, leveraging the infrastructure they already have there rather than building new infrastructure.
Mhm.
Um, I think what excites them is it puts them in the driver's seat in partnership with us. They're taking control of their supply chain and taking control of their carbon emissions. So it's an exciting opportunity for what we hear from grocers to be able to actually affect change directly at that level.
Well, and what's going on is a broad range of innovation across different layers of the distribution system and the food production
Mhm.
system. You've mentioned vertical farming and direct-to-home delivery just in the past few minutes. Are you thinking and talking with other innovators about how to essentially modularize and create new combinations of production and distribution capacity within the economy?
Mhm.
That clearly seems like an opportunity both to be a thought leader and to drive major projects.
Absolutely. This is a huge problem when we think about the more than 3 gigatons of carbon equivalent emissions each and every year that come from that
Mhm.
supply chain piece of our food system, retailing, distribution, production, processing. Clearly, Relocalize isn't solving this problem. And so it's going to take a network. And we deal with, just last week, spent quite a bit of time with a company that's doing last mile delivery with very small autonomous vehicles, for example. And when you combine what we're doing, hyper localizing at DCs, and then you can work with other innovators who are handling that last mile problem together, that's really where you affect massive change because we can't. And packaging is a huge one. Right? Packaging is just a massive problem. We have plastic in our products, and we can't stand it.
Yeah.
And we have to be working with innovators in circular packaging in order for us to affect change there as well. So we're constantly in touch with other innovators, and I'm really optimistic about what's coming and what's possible over the next 5 to 10 years.
Well, packaging alone it could make
Mhm.
a vast difference. And the number of times that something is wrapped in film, unwrapped during the distribution process now is incredible. It produces so much waste. But could we actually have less packaging because you're producing something so close to the consumer?
What's nice about hyper-localizing production is today recycling capabilities vary widely from
Mhm.
municipality to municipality across different geographies. When you hyper-localize, it allows you to look at, it's basically a closed loop, right? So there's 100, let's say there are 100 stores being served by a DC, for
Yeah.
example, and they have a municipal recycling facility there. What are they able to handle? You can even make decisions around what packaging material you use to ensure that it fits the requirements. And we had some feedback on our packaging recently saying, "Oh, if you use these colors, our automatic sensors in the recycling plant struggle with those colors." And so when you're hyper local, you can really, I think, make that effort to say work with directly with at a smaller scale. And for us, we're using a thermoforming technology today to make
Mhm.
our packaging inside the microfactories. There are multiple options for materials you could use, and we're entirely open to customizing what we're using for the geography. And it's just one example. And in the future, what we would love to see is a fully circular solution. And again, when you are local, fully circular is much easier. When you try to do things at a
Yeah.
national scale, the standards you have to meet become to get everybody on the same standard becomes near impossible. So one of the benefits of hyper-localization is you can work at a scale where it's possible to affect change and adapt to local realities.
from Earth911's perspective, you're singing our song, because that is what we spend all day long doing, explaining to people what goes in their local system, and being able to reflect that back to the production system itself so that we can match them up would be a remarkable step forward. Another area that I wanted to ask about, we all remember from the pandemic, the disruptions in the supply chain. How would a micro factory based distributed localized system be more resilient? Can it be?
When you think about a microfactory, we don't really think about them as individual factories. We
Mm-hmm.
actually think about them as a network of production. Actually,
Mm-hmm.
much of the technology we're developing is that industrial Internet of Things and the AI to actually control a network. So for us, there will ultimately be thousands. We call them reloads or microfactories. There will be thousands of reloads across North America, and we don't think about them as individual factories. We think them as a distributed production network.
Okay.
And we all know about networks, and when a part of a network goes down, the rest of the network can pick up the slack. A great example for packaged ice is, you think about Florida, it's a hurricane prone geography. Ice is an essential service. FEMA and Homeland Security are involved in, hey, is there enough ice to deal with food preservation and support people in emergency situations? Well, if you have a distributed production network across Florida, the path of the hurricane may take out some of your production. But you're guaranteed to have plenty left when you have a network. And I think networks are inherently more resilient and inherently resistant to disruption.
Now, you recently closed a $5.8 million seed round. What was the pitch to the investors in terms of where you're going to be when you're done burning through that capital? What's your roadmap?
For us, we're quite fortunate. We're in a market where there's a lot of pull from retailers, in particular in both grocery and convenience retailers. And our next step for us is really prove that it works, prove the sustainability value proposition, go from what we have right now in Jacksonville, Florida, is a demonstration facility. We'll be delivering at the end of this year a full scale true microfactory, showing that, hey, we can deliver the throughput reliably, economically, and deliver that carbon reduction we were looking for. And that allows us to essentially get to scale. And we expect after through 2024 and 2025 to be deploying several microfactories that are doing this. 2026 is where we see the big ramp up, where okay, look, it's now a no-brainer. It's better, it's cheaper, it's greener. And frankly, this is what everybody wants. It's the easiest sales pitch ever. Now it's really about how do we scale production? How do we actually get that network out there as quickly as possible, and then move on to other types of products to expand that network?
There's a lot to unpack. This is a great conversation. We're going to be right back after this quick commercial break. Now back to our conversation with Wayne McIntyre. He's co-founder and CEO of Relocalize, which is a developer of hyper-local food manufacturing services. Lots of robots in boxes. Wayne, how has the response been from grocery retailers themselves and other partners to this idea?
The response has been truly overwhelming. We're a small company. Right now, we're 14 people. And the response really has been unbelievable. Like, we're in the hundreds of $millions of inbound. And the reason for that is quite simple. Retailers have business problems, they have sustainability problems, and ice is a problem area. And when you're getting a startup going, the best thing you can do is start with a problem area. Packaged ice is dominated by geographic monopolists. We all know how nice it is to deal with monopolists. They're really, when you have only one choice, you end up with very little choice or no choice, and very little ability to influence what you're getting. And so there have been a ton of problems with packaged ice across North America. It's a problem area from a business perspective. So as a result, when they hear that, hey, there's a better product and it's sustainable and it's something that puts control into the retailer, and dealing with a monopolist is the opposite of being in control. It's really it's an overwhelming response. So it's frankly the easiest sales pitch I've ever had to do in my 20 plus year career in tech, which is great. Our challenges really are more on how do we deliver on all that demand from the market right now.
So what advancements in automation and other technologies are going to be critical to actually scaling up that ramp that you described in the 2026 timeframe?
One of the big challenges in decentralization is efficiency, right? We all have this dogma: centralization is better,
Mhm.
centralization is better. What we have discovered is, at least in certain areas, such as packaged ice and foods made of water, decentralization can actually be more capital efficient. So we can have a small micro factory at a distribution center. And you know what? Our production capital is actually a little bit less efficient, but we
Mhm.
have buildings, we have no trucks, we have no parking lots, we have no, and so the overall capital efficiency is much higher. So that's, one of the dogmas in centralization is it's always more efficient. The
Yeah.
other part of centralization where efficiency comes from is centralization of labor. And in our case, we actually still have we're creating a ton of interesting jobs. But you think about just about how you'd fly a drone from a distance, for example. Our micro factories are autonomous, and when they need to be driven, they're also driven from a distance. So we can
Mhm.
still bring people together and centralize them either virtually with tools like Zoom that we're on right now and an advanced control system, and in some cases by putting them physically together. But they don't actually have to be at the micro factory site. And this
Right.
is where autonomy comes in. Autonomy is something that we hear at automation all the time. And I think many people think that factories, automation equals autonomy. That is not the case. And this is where a lot of our technology development happens, is bringing autonomy to manufacturing. And the reality right now is, whether it's a robot, a packaging machine, or any other piece of automation equipment, there's a person there to manage it, because that's just the way factories are run today. And we're making that step forward where we go from automated to autonomous, and that's a big step forward. There's a ton of technology that goes into that, mostly software, and of course AI plays an important role as well.
You brought up labor already. So, what kind of impact, economic and social impact, do you see a micro factory having within a community? How many jobs does one of these things create?
The microfactory creates jobs in, there's local jobs, of course. You need to have these things supervised. So there will be a team of support folks that will not be on site each and every day, but will be supporting a network of them. And these are robotics technician, advanced manufacturing jobs. So these are really great jobs. The other jobs come from the monitoring and control. And so this is really, again, you'll still have factory workers, but they're working in front of a computer terminal.
Mhm.
And so we see some jobs probably going away, and these are the ones that are actually tough to fill, the trucking jobs. For example, there's a trucker shortage right now.
Yeah.
And so I don't think we're going to be hurting anyone, because there's so much demand for truckers at this time. However, we're creating these new jobs where, okay, I don't know what we're even going to call it. But it's like that drone pilot. You're the pilot for these micro factories from a distance. And these are well-paying technology jobs that we can be creating in local communities. And they really, in this day and age of technology, can be located anywhere at that point. But we see them being located in North America. We really have a vision for the jobs staying here, these new jobs that we create.
I think a lot of people will like hearing that. As I think about what you're describing and the modularity of the system that you're creating, a more complex localized distribution point is going to have a collection of those microfactories. And as I as I think about it, it doesn't sound like the basis for the food distribution system that we have today, right? I mean, it's a more tailor-made to potentially on-demand kinds of shopping and so forth. Have you thought about how to partner with a direct-to-consumer company and not to go against your customers, but take your customers out of the sequence potentially, or give them another level of service they can offer to their consumer?
And we're really relying on our retail partners, I think, to develop that. And they are all looking at strategies for that. They want to go direct to the consumer as well. And there's a great opportunity for efficiency there as well. So if we think about, well, it hasn't been announced yet, but we are looking at working with a top 10 retailer, a new one, hopefully
Mhm.
announcing in the coming weeks or months. But a big part of what we're doing with them is actually producing close to the fulfillment center, and then they do have direct delivery from that point of view. So that's where we
Okay.
really pioneer what we call the one-step journey for food. So distribution, fulfillment, manufacturing, production all happens in one place. and now you have ideally an electrified direct to consumer delivery vehicle bringing that product to the customers. What that does is, one, it means that we're not making individual trips to stores,
Right.
right? And so it takes that last mile delivery and makes it more efficient as well. That's what we really get excited about when we talk about a food system that is efficient. I think that direct to consumer, one step journey for food from production through to consumption is what gets us really pumped, because that's about as efficient as it can possibly get.
So what percentage of the food supply chain do you think can be localized efficiently?
Great question. There's a lot that we can do when we're talking about, say, I think two ways to think about it. Number of products, for example, or the number of trucks. What I like about focusing on products made of water is these trucks are mostly empty. So you're having a disproportionate impact. And when I say they're empty, it's they're weight limited. So in other words, you hit your weight really early, and now there's an empty truck around you, right? There's another side to expensive trucking too, which is called high cube fill, which means high volume products. So now your space is full, say potato chip, but you know what? There's so much weight that could be on that vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I don't have a number for you, to be frank, Mitch.
Okay.
But when we think about it, it's how do we make, we focus on those products where they have a disproportionate impact on trucking efficiency,
mm-hmm.
and an outside impact on trucking efficiency because they're heavy or high volume. We focus on those products. We basically make the whole distribution process more efficient. Right? So if you could put chips and ice together, for example, that's way more efficient than what happens today, where often ice is traveling by itself on a mostly empty truck from a volume perspective.
Well, and from a monitoring perspective, that's relatively easy to solve now with visual computing and so forth. As I think about how Costco or Walmart scaled, they would do an analysis of a market and say, if we put a store right here, we're within a given number. I think it usually is around 100,000 consumers that we're trying to drive into the store on a regular basis. Is there an optimal placement of microfactories? Have you started to explore how to map the future of your distribution network and your production network?
We have, and we're fortunate. We're piggybacking on something that really already exists. Distribution centers are already organized in that way, right? So, if we think of a typical distribution center, let's say it's serving 100. There are different distribution models, but let's say an average one might be serving 100 to 150 grocery stores, for example. It's been put in a place that is optimal for that 100 to 150 stores, and so we're essentially piggybacking on that existing infrastructure that ideally is already optimal. And so for us, we look at essentially any distribution center that in our retail food ecosystem is a good place for a micro factory, because they're already sized to fit that number of stores, right?
So that actually provides you resilience regardless of whether or not retail stores thrive or not. You're going to be in proximity to where the consumer is. But initially, it sounds like your customer is the retailer. Do you imagine an environment in which the consumer is your customer?
We're laser focused on helping retailers succeed.
Okay.
And the reason for that right now is, customers, want a basket of goods. And I think buying a basket of goods is always better than delivering a single product.
Oh, yeah.
So we see retailers as a critical component in that system. We want to be part of that basket, and we want to help make that overall basket more efficient. Again, we're a manufacturing company for ice and one day beverage, and hopefully one day we move beyond that as well as we scale. But the retailer is key to that right now. They hold the customer relationship. They're building they have the distribution center, and it allows us to borrow infrastructure that's already there rather than creating new infrastructure. And it's just like the sea cans we use to build, the shipping containers we build in. We would like things to always be second life. And in a way, these distribution centers already exist. And by borrowing infrastructure that exists, we don't have to create new infrastructure. And there's a reuse component to what's already there. That gets us excited as well, right?
Oh, I love that idea of reusing the existing built environment too. I mean,
Mhm.
you're leveraging a lot of the right ideas and trends here. As you think about the long-term vision for Relocalize, what do the next 5 to 10 years look like? What should we expect to see the company achieve?
We're the first in this new world of autonomous microfactories for the food and beverage system. We hope to inspire others to join this as a movement. We really see microfactories as a movement. We can't do it all alone. But when we talk about ice and beverage, these are together. This is a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. We really see ourselves taking a massive position. We'd like to be the Google of autonomous production for the food system, but that will give us is the power and the scale to start to find solutions to take what we've already done and then say bring it to the vertical farming market. As we're working with retailers, these are really strong relationships. We're building this relationship. We're building credibility. Let's say, for example, when you're producing on demand and you don't need the warehouse anymore, the cold storage warehouse, how else could we use that? That could be production area for another product. So
Yeah.
I really think it's that, for us, our goal is, it sounds like it's a big thing to say for a 14-person company in Montreal, Quebec today, but we really do see ourselves as going quickly, getting a lot of scale, and then using that scale to achieve our purpose and expand into other categories and really drive a rethinking of how our food system is organized, and as much as possible getting rid of that chain and moving to a completely localized production system, whether we're talking about manufactured foods or the center of the aisle, or whether we're talking about the perimeter and fresh foods.
Obviously, a lot of connections to be made. How can folks follow along with what you're doing? And if they're a retailer, reach out to you to find out more.
I mean, the best place to reach out is always LinkedIn. I think for us, you can follow the company and myself on LinkedIn as well. You can go to our website. It's relocalize.com. We have a contact page there, but and we encourage people to reach out. Again, we do believe that we can't do this alone. This needs to be a movement, and a big part of what we're doing is trying to inspire people to think differently. And the more people who get involved in microfactories and local production, the better from my perspective.
Well, Relocalize is a really intriguing story. Thanks for sharing it with us, Wayne.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mitch. Happy to get the good word out about the hyper-local production opportunity.
Well, thank you. And come back and tell us more about how it continues to evolve.
Thank you.
That was my conversation with Wayne McIntyre, co-founder and CEO of Relocalize, which is pioneering the hyper-local food and beverage production infrastructure. You can learn more about the company at relocalize.com. Relocalize is all one word, no space, no dash. Relocalize.com. In reimagining the network of production, as Wayne described it, requires balancing the familiar with the fantastic. We're locked into the existing system. That system is well defended by incumbents, and new components are met by those incumbents like infections in a body. They'll fight change as often as they'll embrace it. But those who can embrace change completely disrupt the old model. And it sounds like Relocalize is getting subtraction there. Now, of course, it's easy to describe that, but very hard to do. You start from a modular approach, breaking the production system down into its component parts, as Relocalize has done with ice production and soon beverage production and packaging. That modularization allows us to experiment, first on paper and then in the market with green alternatives to the wasteful ways of the industrial era. And once one innovation takes hold, others can be bolted on. So, as Wayne suggested, it's possible to start thinking about the modular elements of the food production system as recombinable elements. So you could link an indoor salad greens farm to a microfactory so that the harvest moves directly to packaging without any intervening transportation. That would dramatically reduce emissions, waste, and high costs associated with our food supply. So Relocalize is an early example of the potential to rebuild for a sustainable future, and we'll be tracking that story for you as it plays out. In the meantime, I hope you take a moment to share this podcast or any of the more than 490 interviews that we produced on sustainability in your ear with your friends, your family, your coworkers. Writing a review on your favorite podcast platform will help your neighbors find us. Folks, you are the amplifier that can spread more ideas to create less waste. So please take a moment to share the story. Tell your friends, family, everyone you meet on the street that they can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, or their favorite purveyor of podcast goodness. Thank you for your support. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. This is Sustainability in Your Ear, and we will be back with another innovator interview soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.